appreciate you.
Perfect.
I appreciate you joining, man. It's been a long time since we've connected, and you've been, I would say, on a world tour. You've probably, I think, since the last time we've connected, you've done so many different things. So I want to give you credit and kudos for your journey and your experiences. I think they speak for themselves. I think you have done what a lot of other people want to do, right? Necessarily when you don't have that opportunity to go play at the next level. And you kind of can find a passion, right, by kind of failing your way to success, right? I think that's what's in your bio. And so what does that mean to you exactly, Max, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, no, and first off, it's good to link up. It's funny, too, because I was just thinking about, hey, maybe it's come time to change that bio a little bit now that I'm 28. And I think most people, when they read that bio on my Instagram, like, you know what I'm referring to. But as the years go by, I think some people are like, wait, what? You're failing? Like, you had, like, the dope wedding last year, and you've had these dope jobs. Like, what are you failing at? And that's not lost upon me, but I think it speaks to the beauty of kind of how my life has progressed, especially this past 5 years where, at 23, I was down in the dumps, man. I was a big-time quarterback recruit with as high of expectations as you could have in the most popular sport at the most popular position. And I ultimately, didn't live up to those expectations, but it wasn't that because I was like some slappy or something. It didn't work out for a bunch of reasons. And I think there's something to be said about, on at least especially 5 years ago was, hey, you could look at all these failures, right? All these position battles I lost, transferred to different school, didn't work out, didn't throw the touchdowns, didn't win the games, didn't start the games that I thought I would. Yet on the flip side, there's a lot of people that say, man, this kid's crushing it. And man, like he's got a lot of success, which I'm appreciative of that, but it's funny because depending on how you talk to, especially 5 years ago, it was a totally different review of like where my life was at.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's Mental Health Awareness Month, right? And congratulations on one of those successes, Max, on marriage. A lot of people obviously want to get married, and I think you found what you would call your soulmate. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Victoria Browne now, she is a mental health and body support advocate, right? I forget what you call it, but that's kind of where she focuses her attention, and that's where she focuses her energy. Are you mad that it took you this long to find her, as far as her mental health kind of help towards you, right? I think we could have both used some awareness around our mental health and improving it, and steps that we could have taken in school while we were playing at such a high level, right? Like, are you a little pissed off that it took you this long to find someone who could give you, good advice as far as that goes?
Yeah, man, it's funny because we kind of, when we started crush on each other, we both were in position battle. She played volleyball at USC, I played football there, and so that was something we both kind of related on. And that was, it's one thing to like hit on each other at a party and whatnot, but it's a whole other deal when you're like trying to get close to one another. And that was really like the first driver, is us relating on that level of, hey, this is our dream to play at USC, to be playing this position, and that mental health component, like the wear and tear of those battles. That's when we first started really getting close to one another. So it's cool seeing it full circle. And we've been together for 6 going on 7 years now. And so I've really seen how her platform and her development on the mental health side has evolved over the years. And looking back on my sports career, I actually was a guy that in 2013 I saw sports psych, and I would like to think I was kind of ahead of the curve a little bit there. And it wasn't because I was trying to be super. I guess I didn't even realize the maybe true benefits of a sports psychologist at the time. I just got to the point where I was like, I'm not playing well, bro, and I want to do whatever it takes to get there. And that was kind of like a last resort for me, where I remember walking into my sports psych's office like, hey, like I'll do whatever it takes to start playing well. This to me is, the one rock that I haven't turned over. And so let's see how this plays out. And I think it definitely helped me, but there's also part of me that says, hey, if I had done that in 2023 rather than 2013, when, hey, now the stigma is lessened tremendously because of the work of people like yourself, of Vic and various organizations. Kevin Love's a name that always comes up. And it's less stigmatized. I think it's easier to have those conversations, go ask for help. And then for me personally, I didn't have a problem asking for help. My issue was more just the judgment. Like, man, I'm a guy that has to go to a sports psych. Like, man, I really have to do this. Like, man, I can't just buck up and power through and that thing. And I think nowadays the mental health conversation's in a much better place where I don't think I would have judged myself as hard. And in turn, maybe I would have played better and had more success on the field and just in life if I was in a different era.
Yeah. When do you think, just having that conversation, and I appreciate that transparency. I think I felt the same way. And it wasn't until, I want to say my sophomore year, Max, that we actually introduced, or maybe my junior year, because we went 4-8 that year when DK was playing. And, we really cleared house, right? And we got a new training staff in. We got a new nutrition staff in. Obviously, new coaching staff, offensive and defensively. But then we introduced a sports psychologist, right? And she was great and she was phenomenal. But it took until my junior year, until 2017, for an institution such as Notre Dame and, even at USC. But you're competing at the highest level, both academically, athletically, and spiritually, right? And so you would imagine that these institutions would have some resource. I think they do, but they're just not as accessible. And athletes, that conversation was always tough to have, like you mentioned, right? So like when did you take that jump and when did you become comfortable with it? And kind of when did you see the effect and the impact that those conversations were having on you?
Yeah, it's a good point too, that first part of what you said. Like for me, it was even the physical act of having to leave the football facility and walk across campus to the, what was like the medical facility at USC, which was outside of athletics, and like you're like going off campus, which was like, it was a whole thing versus nowadays, coaches are doing a much, much better job of having those conversations just be facilitated, either mandated by the head coach. You have to meet with the sports psychologist to check in, and that's amazing. And I think, again, I do think we need to give people credit for how far this conversation has come. I think it's so easy to always be like, hey, this needs to be fixed, this needs to be fixed, which there's some truth to that, but it's come a long way, which is huge.
Yeah.
But I think for me, I just got to a point like in my career where I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired, man. I was a guy that I was like, hey, I'm not getting outworked. It's not a matter of me not doing what I need to do from like what my coaches and strength coaches are telling me. So like, where else can I go? And so that was kind of the last push for me to go see a sports psych, which might be different than most people. I think most people might be, I'm empathetic where you're in such a dark place where you can't even get yourself out of there. And that's why I think it's huge to have that support network. And like I said, have the people around you, for coaches, for teammates, to have those, to facilitate those conversations where it's easy for someone to maybe not even ask for help, but kind of almost like stumble into those conversations where you're able to access a professional in an easier way.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was my story, and I really spent like two years, 13 and 14, my true freshman and redshirt freshman year, really diving into that space all in.
That's so early, right? Earlier than a lot of people even would have thought about it, right? I think more it's just at that age, you're just thinking, specifically for quarterbacks, how can I throw the ball better, right? Can I get back to my fundamentals? What am I doing wrong, right? Am I not putting in the work, right? But I think the mental component, I think you were pretty, again, like you mentioned, well ahead of your time, thinking about that component of your life and how it could affect you playing ball. What's one thing Vicky hangs her hat on, right? When she like, what's her motto around mental health as an athlete, and what she promotes, and kind of what you guys have taken to your relationship? I guess you can think about it as, what is she trying to put forward this month, right? I think there's an extra emphasis on mental health, obviously, this month. And so she probably has a lot of content getting ready to be deployed, and kind of what's her go-to?
Her go-to is to treat mental health just like you treat your physical health. And I think it's really relevant to this conversation of, There's, hey, our quarterback coach and how can I throw the ball better? There's our strength coach and how can I get bigger and faster, stronger? But there needs to consistently be that third pillar of, hey, how's your brain doing? How's your mental health doing? And I think even for me as a retired athlete, I mean, I've been 5 years removed. I still see a counselor to this day, monthly, a check-in, and I'm the type of guy where I don't have a huge pressing issue like that I need to solve, but that's kind of the point, right? Is, hey, continue to check in with yourself, continue to try to, fine tune maybe where you need to level up. So the mental health conversation isn't just when there is a crisis, that a huge fire needs to be put out, that, hey, that conversation can happen much earlier, which I know is something that I've tried to establish, and Vic has been a huge driving force in trying to make that happen.
That's awesome. And then I think that's a good transition to kind of the next part of the conversation, Max. And you have, similar to my path, but you found another route outside of sport. And, we both thought we would be playing on Sundays. That was obviously the ultimate goal. We both played at the highest of highs in terms of competing at the institutions that we competed at. But, were you always kind of business minded? Like, what led you to having that opportunity with Gary Vee, who, a lot of people who are going to be listening to this are well versed with, and you coming into New York City? Can you speak a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, man, it's a cool story. I think to answer that first part, I've always been aware of the fact that the playing days were going to end at some point. Like you said, for me, I thought that was going to be when I was like 20 years later, when I was 38, not 23 kind of thing. Obviously, that's wishful thinking. But the story is cool. In college, I ultimately lost my job at USC to Sam Darnold, and as things played out, he obviously got drafted by the Jets, and for that few years there, he was the chosen one, so to speak. And I remained tight with Sam. We had a good relationship throughout the way. I always said that if we weren't battling head on, we probably would have been really, really close friends. We're still buds now, and touch base a couple times a year. But back when I was transitioning away from football in 2019, I called Sam and I said, hey man, I'm in a position where I don't really know what I want to do career-wise, and I got the piece of advice that if you don't know what you want to do career-wise, go work for someone that you admire or you aspire or you like what they're doing. And for me at that time, it was Gary Vee and what he had going on. I think I had the wherewithal to say, hey, this content thing is not slowing down. This is an industry that's only going to continue to develop, and Gary is, in my opinion, the thought leader when it comes to content and the evolution of social media and social platforms. And I said, hey Sam, can you help me out, make an intro, and see if I can get a job with him? And he said, for sure, I'll see if I can make it happen. Put us in a DM thread together, and the rest is history. I was hired a few months later, moved out to New York, and spent the full 2019 year working on Gary's content team, which was awesome. And even though now I'm in commercial real estate and broadcasting, I still use the learnings from his team, and got nothing but love for Gary. Crossed paths with him last month, actually. So great dude.
Awesome, man. I appreciate that background. And Sam's obviously a good friend to kind of lend that hand and connection. So I think, just naturally that conversation kind of leads into name, image, and likeness and opportunities that lie ahead for some of these college athletes, being entrepreneurs, being creatives, right? Starting and founding their own companies, but then content, right? What advice and kind of how would you have approached Max NIL when you were back, playing at the peak of your marketability? And what advice could you share with some of these current college athletes and yeah.
Yeah, and I'll start by saying I'm someone who, to my downfall, I'm someone who's like been dabbling with content. I'm someone who creates content, I post content, but I have consistently remained inconsistent over the past 5 years or so. So by no means am I speaking from a lens of a guy who's got it all figured out. So I certainly relate to it's ultimately insecurity that I think a lot of athletes deal with in terms of, all right, what content should I post? Is it weird, walking around with the camera and things like that? But for me, I guess if I was Caleb Williams, and obviously he's the peak guy right now in college football, I would take the NIL money that I'm making and I would invest in his case, he's got way more money than a lot of guys, but I would invest a significant portion in hiring content creators to, help film the nuances of my life. Like if you're Caleb Williams right now, yes, people want to see what you do on the field, but they also want to see what you eat for breakfast, how you go to class, how you do your homework, what's your Call of Duty game like, what are you doing on a Friday night? Caleb's a guy with a lot of interest, right? He's a fashion guy, right?
Yeah.
Caleb Williams goes to the mall. Like, what's he thinking about? All of those pillars, man, he could absolutely crush it. And I think what happens with the athletes is that can be a huge undertaking, right? It can be daunting of like, how can I do all this content stuff? Like, what are the best practices and whatnot? And so I would reinvest a lot of the NIL earnings into hiring someone to support you in making that content. Because I think when we were in college, the guys that did execute on content, I played with a guy like Juju Smith, a guy like, Connor Sullivan, who's a name that maybe this audience doesn't know, but he was a backup quarterback for us that was one of the first YouTubers in that realm back in 2012, 2013. And it was awkward. He would have to in my opinion, it was awkward at the time. He had to walk around with a camera and people were kind of laughing and chuckling and whatnot. But then 10 years later, that Connor does this full time based off the content that he developed when he played as a fourth string quarterback.
Yeah.
So I say that all to now student athletes have the resources to, I think, invest in that content realm. And I would say go all in on that, because one thing that I have noticed is when this NIL conversation happened 2 years ago, I think every athlete was like, oh, sweet, we're going to make all this money and it's going to be great. But most athletes can't execute on content. And if you don't have a presence online, it's hard to drive your NIL evaluation high. And that's a huge vulnerability and just an area that I think most athletes don't execute on. And I think hiring support around you could go a long way. And that's certainly something I would have done 5-10 years ago.
Isn't it easier when you're out in Los Angeles, though, versus when you're in a place like South Bend, right, to kind of just have that mindset and thought process?
See, it's funny you say that, bro, because I have a TikTok vid fired up. I actually think that point is overblown in terms of, oh, you're in LA, it's easier to get the NIL scene. I think you're right in the fact that when you're around LA and the content culture, it's easy to stumble into videographers and in that whole realm, sure. And if you're walking around campus, you're not the only one that might be playing in that space, but look at the top, I just saw a post today, the top female creators, right? The top two are from LSU. Then you got Iowa. You got
Paige Buchers in Connecticut, yeah.
Exactly. You can create content wherever. To your point, I think the conversation is more, it's not as weird in LA as it might be in the Midwest, but you can get it done wherever. And I think that factor can be overblown, and it came up in a conversation I had about Bronny James committing to USC. If Bronny, and obviously Bronny is 101, but if Bronny went to Ohio State, if he went to Oregon and Eugene, if he went to USC, his NIL evaluation is going to be the exact same because he can execute online, and when he posts something up, people are gonna pay attention.
Yeah, I mean, in the Midwest, you can run into people like Isaac Cooch and Allison Cooch, and you know what I mean. So you kind of get them anywhere you go.
I was hanging out with them last weekend. Great people.
Were you on one of those influencer trips?
I was, man. I was the plus one on one of those F1 Miami. It was
that was awesome.
It was a good time. But no, I mean, and it's funny because Isaac and I were talking about that because I asked him, I was like, and for listeners that don't know, Isaac's 7-year vet, defensive end in the NFL, played for a bunch of teams, and he's absolutely crushed it on TikTok as, funny enough, he's branded himself as the kind of the plus one NFL husband. And I was like, how's that work when he's played with teams? Like, do they view that as like a distraction? Is it cool? How does that work? And he said, it was awkward in the beginning, or he didn't say awkward. He said it was delicate in the beginning where, guys are like, oh, you're doing this TikTok thing. Like, oh, man, you're a sellout. But then now, because he's crushed it, it's turned to, hey, man, I want to get into that. Like, hey, can you help me do this? And those types of conversations. And he was joking around saying, um, like he's been cut a bunch of times,
Yeah.
and he said the only time it's ever really come up, the social media side is he said he got cut by the Browns, and the Browns like GM wife is a follower of Isaac and his wife Allie. And then the Browns GM's wife was all pissed that like, man, you cut one of my favorite influencers, which like it's a funny bit, and I think that's the beauty of being in 2023 is people have accept social.
Right. And thinking about it at the college level, man, like NIL for us, how we're thinking about it at MOGL is it's a pretty holistic and flywheel network effect where, as more alumni and more of these local communities are supporting these athletes through NIL deals, and you're given the ability for athletes to engage with their fans. Like we think it's going to drive more awareness to these universities and to these athletic programs and departments, right? From ticket sales to merchandise and apparel, to sell, buying anything else that these athletic departments are selling. And so I think on the same side within with NFL, you see people becoming more attached to these teams, right? Through people like Isaac's and his wife's social media pages, right? Just because they're closer to the action than they've ever been before. The content is able to speak to them a little bit better, right? And so they just have a better affinity. So
Totally, and I think for me that word like holistic that you use, it's funny. I feel like there's two schools of thought with social media. There's, hey, you have to pick a lane and stick to that lane and execute on that lane, and then there's the other people that say, hey, cast a wide net, post about whatever you want, post about your interests in sports and music and whatever. And I think there's some truth to both. I'm friends with influencers that, hey, like one of my friends, Corporate Natalie's built a brand off of corporate. Yeah, exactly. She's built a brand off of corporate humor, and she has executed on that, and that's been her foundation. And then once she built that foundation, then she's able to kind of grow and get into TV and get into stand up and get into other comedy stuff. For me, it's funny because I post about real estate, I post about broadcasting, I post about being the husband of a content creator, I post about being a huge LeBron James fan, and that can be sporadic at times. But it also allows, I think, there to be interest. Mm-hmm. It allows there to be people to connect with you on different dynamics. And I think at the end of the day, there's, rhyme and reason to both. But you just got to execute on what's in your heart. And even if you are a slot receiver for Notre Dame, you don't got to be just the football. You don't got to post just the release clips in South Bend. Like you can post about other interests that you have, and I wouldn't let guys get hung up on that dynamic.
Yeah, what's next for content, Max? Like what like if you're I guess sit in the brain of Gary Vee, right? Since you mentioned him being the king here in this regard, like where would he see content going next, right? Where are you and Vicky spending time? Is that building your own, I feel like people would build their own platforms, maybe make better, options for influencers and content creators, whether it be from a monetization standpoint or like what's next? Where can college athletes look?
Yeah, I mean, the whole AI conversation is interesting and something that I'm not well versed in, but I think we'd all be naive to not at least acknowledge it in terms of, AI, could it help in, idea creation, right? If you're saying, hey, what are the top 10 most topics about slot receivers in the NFL? Like, could that streamline the content creation process? I think there's also like, when we fast forward 10, 15 years, like, are we going to be in like holograms and like, the metaverse and things like that? Like
Right.
that's outside the scope of what I know. But I think, again, we'd be naive to not agree with that. I just think big picture, I really like your word holistic. And I think the content creators that win are the ones that take the follower inside their life in all facets of their life. And to be a little bit more specific about the student athlete, I mean, I don't even need to project. Look at the student athletes that I've won on social. It's the people that it's the creators that take the follower inside all aspects of their life. And a guy like a Caleb Williams, again, if he posted about the nuances of his life, people would eat that up, and he's going to be fine no matter what. He's a guy. He's no ego, great head on his shoulders. It's a big reason why if I'm an NFL GM, I'm lining up to pick him. So he'll be fine either way. But for the guy that, might be the name right now in college football and be not relevant in 10 years, gain your followers right now by taking people into your life, and don't be closed off. I always laugh when I see either friends of mine or student athletes on like Instagram that have a close friends dynamic on their stories where they like post their like natural normal content to their close friends, and then they post their more like professional content to the world. I'm like, dude, get out of here with that. Take people into your entire life, because that's how people relate to you, and that's how you can scale it long term.
Yeah. So you're saying you don't have a close friends?
I got no close friends. I got close friends, but not on the IG dynamic.
Right. No, cool.
And I mean, don't get me wrong. If you're posting like goofy stuff and drama stuff, right? Maybe you got close friends, but
right.
You know what I'm talking about.
Right. Cool, man. Well, that's all I've got for you, man. And again, I've enjoyed the conversation. If you wouldn't mind letting people know where they could find you and what you're up to next, and any announcements that you want to share with the people.
No, of course, man. And yeah, thanks for having me on. Fun to follow what you guys got going on. I think the NIL space, I mean, it's, as I'm sure you're living daily, it's changing. It feels like every single quarter. So I'm sure it's an industry that's fun and fresh, but also daunting because there's so much unknown and uncertainty and whatnot. But yeah, man, I'm on all the platforms: Instagram, Max Browne, Twitter, LinkedIn, and TikTok is Brown Max. But yeah, I'm in real estate. I'm in broadcasting, active voice in the sports world, and then trying to level up the content game and keep on executing that and practice what I'm preaching today on this pod.
Right. Consistency is best, my man. Keep showing up. I appreciate it, Max.
Keep showing up. Thanks, Brandon. Always fun chatting.
Likewise.